Texas, May 19th, 1836, Fort Parker. A 17-year-old girl watches her father-in-law struck down by a war club. Her mother-in-law stabbed and left bleeding in the dirt. Before she can scream, warriors seize her and throw her onto a horse. She is 6 months pregnant. Her name is Rachel Plummer. And for the next 21 months, she will experience things so terrible that even in her own published memoir years later, in the safety of her father's home, she still refused to describe them fully. She wrote only this: "To undertake to narrate their treatment would only add to my present distress, for it is with feelings of the deepest mortification that I think of it, much less speak or write of it." Rachel Plummer was one of thousands. During the 1800s, native tribes across the American Southwest captured hundreds of women from frontier settlements. Some were ransomed back to their families after months or years of negotiation. Some escaped during moments of chaos and walked hundreds of miles back to civilization. Most were never seen again, and the ones who did return carried stories that would haunt them until their final breath. Stories they could barely bring themselves to tell. Stories that 19th century newspapers, which routinely printed every gruesome detail of public hangings, sometimes refused to publish in full. This is not frontier legend. These are documented accounts, court testimonies given under oath, memoirs published by the survivors themselves and sold to thousands of readers who wanted to know what really happened out there in the wilderness. I am Crown and Dagger, and here we do not look away. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, support this channel with a like and subscribe, because what comes next, your teacher never mentioned. So let's begin where it always began. The raids always followed the same pattern. Warriors attacked at dawn or dusk when visibility was poor, and families were at their most vulnerable. Isolated homesteads were the easiest targets, families living miles from their nearest neighbor with no one to hear their screams. The men of the household died first: husbands, fathers, brothers, sons old enough to hold a rifle, usually within the first few minutes. There was no negotiation, no warning, no mercy, just efficiency. Then the selection began. Women of childbearing age were the most valuable. They could work. They could be traded to other tribes or sold to Mexican traders who operated slave markets in the Northern Territories. They could become wives and bear children who would grow up as full members of the tribe. Young girls under 10 were also prized because they could be raised within the tribe and eventually forget their former lives entirely. Given enough time, they would speak the language, follow the customs, and remember nothing of who they had been before. The elderly were killed immediately. They couldn't work, they couldn't bear children. They would slow the raiding party down during the long journey back to camp. So were infants. A crying baby could alert pursuers to the group's location. They were liabilities that the warriors simply couldn't afford. The selection process was ruthless, practical, stripped of any emotion. Olive Oatman was 14 years old when warriors attacked her family near the Gila River in Arizona in February 1851. Her family had been traveling west with a group of settlers, but disagreements about the route had left them isolated and alone. The Oatmans pressed on by themselves, convinced they were only days from safety. They were wrong. Olive watched her father beaten to death with clubs, her mother killed beside him, her older sister, her baby brother. 4 of her siblings murdered in minutes while she stood paralyzed with terror. When the killing stopped, only Olive and her 7-year-old sister, Mary Ann, remained alive. The warriors dragged them into the desert. Olive later described walking barefoot through the wilderness for an entire night, over sharp rocks that sliced her feet, through patches of cactus that left dozens of spines embedded in her skin. No food, no water, no rest. Every time she stumbled from exhaustion, she was struck with clubs. Every time she slowed, she was beaten until she moved faster. Her little sister walked beside her, bleeding from her own wounds, too terrified to cry, too exhausted to speak. By dawn, Olive's feet were so torn and swollen that every step felt like walking on broken glass. But she kept moving, because stopping meant dying, and this was only the first night. Once captives reached the tribal camp, their new existence began immediately. They were not guests awaiting rescue. They were not prisoners awaiting ransom. They were not people anymore. They were property. Women were put to work from the first day, before their wounds had healed, before they had eaten a real meal, before they had slept. Gathering firewood until their hands cracked and bled, carrying heavy clay vessels of water for miles under the brutal desert sun, scraping animal hides until their fingers were raw, digging for edible roots in hard-packed soil, hauling loads that would exhaust a grown man. Every task that no one else wanted to do fell to them. Every job too menial or too exhausting for members of the tribe became theirs. They ate last. Whatever scraps remained after the entire tribe had finished eating, that was their meal. If a hunt had been poor, there might be nothing left at all. They went to sleep with empty stomachs and woke before dawn to work again. Rachel Plummer described her first months among the Comanches. I was kept constantly at work from earliest dawn until late at night. When I failed to perform my tasks to their satisfaction, I was beaten with clubs and sticks. My life was one of constant dread, suffering, and misery. The beatings came frequently and without warning, for working too slowly, for showing exhaustion, for crying when the pain became unbearable, for speaking English to another captive, sometimes for no reason anyone could determine, simply because they were there, simply because they were powerless, simply because there were no consequences. Olive Oatman spent an entire year as a slave among the Yavapai before being traded to the Mojave tribe. During that year, she and her little sister, Mary Ann, were worked to the edge of death, beaten regularly, fed whatever scraps no one else wanted, given no shelter from the brutal Arizona sun or the freezing desert nights. Mary Ann was only 7 years old. Her small body simply couldn't handle the abuse, the starvation, the endless labor. She began wasting away, growing thinner each week, weaker each day. Olive watched her little sister dying by inches, watched the light fade from her eyes, watched her become a shadow of the laughing child she had been, and there was nothing she could do to save her. But what truly broke these women was not the labor. It was not the starvation. It was what happened when they disobeyed, or sometimes when they did nothing wrong at all. Matilda Lockhart was 13 years old when she was captured by Comanches in Texas in 1838. Just a child, a farmer's daughter who had never harmed anyone. She spent 2 agonizing years in captivity before being returned during peace negotiations in San Antonio in March 1840. When the Texan authorities saw what had been done to her, they could barely speak. Hardened frontiermen who had seen violence their entire lives stood in shocked silence. A witness named Maverick, who helped bathe and dress the girl after her release, later described what she saw in her diary. Her head, arms, and face were full of bruises and sores. Her nose was actually burnt off to the bone, all the fleshy end gone, and a great scab formed on the end of the bone. Both nostrils were wide open and denuded of flesh. Matilda, barely able to speak above a whisper, explained how it happened. The women of the tribe had made a game of tormenting her. They would wake her from sleep by pressing burning sticks to her face. Her nose was their favorite target. Night after night, week after week, month after month. Her screams amused them. The smell of her burning flesh made them laugh. By the end, there was simply nothing left to burn. Her entire body was covered with similar marks, burns on her arms, her back, her legs, evidence of systematic cruelty that went far beyond punishment, beyond discipline, into something darker that served no purpose except suffering itself. Maverick wrote that Matilda was utterly degraded and could not hold up her head again. Matilda Lockhart never recovered from what had been done to her. Not physically, not mentally, not spiritually. She died 2 years after her rescue. Her body too damaged to continue. Her spirit too thoroughly broken to want to. She was 15 years old when she died. Fire was a tool the tribes understood well. Sometimes captives were staked to the ground and burned slowly. The fires were kept deliberately small so the suffering would last for hours. This was usually reserved for male prisoners or for sending messages to enemies. More commonly, fire was used as daily discipline. Heated metal pressed against the skin, burning coals placed on arms and legs, sticks pulled straight from campfires and pressed against faces to wake captives or punish them for minor offences. The smell of burning flesh became familiar, expected, routine, but the most horrifying use of fire came as collective punishment. As revenge, after the Council House fight in San Antonio in March 1840, where Texan authorities killed several Comanche chiefs during what was supposed to be a peace negotiation, the tribe retaliated against the captives they still held. 13 prisoners were staked to the ground. Fires were built around them. Small fires, careful fires, designed to cause maximum suffering over maximum time. The process took hours. Matilda Lockhart's younger sister was among them. She was 6 years old. When another Comanche band arrived weeks later to negotiate for different captives, they brought a survivor who described everything that had happened. Every detail, every scream. The message was unmistakable. Cross us, and everyone you love will suffer in ways you cannot imagine. Think about this for a moment. Women who had never harmed anyone. Farmers' wives, daughters, mothers, children, taken from everything they knew, from everyone they loved, and subjected to years of systematic suffering. Some of them were held for months, some for years, some for decades. What would you have done in their place? How long could you have survived? Let me know in the comments. There was another test captives faced, a ritual designed to break them from their very first day. It was called running the gauntlet. The captive was forced to run between two long rows of warriors armed with clubs, sticks, whips, and anything else that could cause pain. Every person in those rows struck them as they passed. The goal was simple: reach the end still standing. Those who fell were beaten until they got up. Those who couldn't get up faced worse. The gauntlet served multiple purposes. It was entertainment for the tribe, a celebration of the successful raid. It was a way to break the captive spirit immediately, to show them their new place in the world. And it was a test. Those who showed courage, who refused to cry out, who kept running no matter how many times they were struck, sometimes earned marginally better treatment afterward. Those who showed weakness only invited more abuse. Rachel Plummer wrote about enduring the gauntlet multiple times during her 21 months of captivity. She learned quickly, through brutal experience, that showing pain only encouraged more violence, that crying only made them hit harder. They respected bravery more than anything, she wrote years later. I wish I had known it sooner. By the end of her captivity, Rachel had learned to fight back. When one of her captors attacked her, she beat the woman so severely that the warriors standing nearby actually laughed and cheered. They admired her spirit, her refusal to be broken. From that day forward, her treatment improved, not dramatically, but enough to notice. Most captives never discovered this. They remained victims, growing weaker each day, until they died in captivity or were finally ransomed back to families who barely recognized them. Some women faced a different fate entirely. They were taken as wives. This might sound like better treatment. In some ways it was. Wives ate with the tribe instead of eating scraps, faced less random physical abuse, had a defined place in the social order, had someone who, in their own way, claimed responsibility for them. But they had no choice in the matter, none at all. Young women were given to warriors as prizes, rewards for successful raids. They were expected to fulfill all duties of a wife, every duty, domestic and otherwise. Resistance was met with violence until resistance stopped. Some women eventually accepted their new lives, not because they chose to, but because acceptance was the only way to survive. Cynthia Ann Parker was captured at age 9 in the same raid that took Rachel Plummer. The attack on Fort